All right, so this video is going to give you the notes that you missed in class if um, you were absent when we watched Guns, Germs, and Steel Part 2. So these notes go into your chart with the title, Pizarro's Conquistadors versus Atahualpa's Incas. So we know that in 1532, when Pizarro attacked the Inca Empire, he, he had less than 200 conquistadors with him, whereas in the spot where Pizarro was attacking, we know that at Atahualpa, he had about 80,000 soldiers with him. Yet somehow, in a very short period of time, Pizarro was able to take over the entire Inca Empire, which was the biggest empire in the Americas at the time. So, how did he do it? Right? The big question here is what gave Pizarro and his conquistadors an advantage over the Incas in 1532? Well, he had a few things. He had the arquebus gun. As you saw in the video, the arquebus gun was not great. It, by today's standards, was a pretty terrible gun. But at the time, it provided a really big psychological and emotional advantage to the conquistadors, right? It created a loud noise. It created a strange smell, and it would kill people, right? This stick, which that people of the Americas had never seen before, all of a sudden had what seemed like magical powers, right? And so the arquebus gun gave a psychological advantage to Pizarro and his conquistadors. Next would be the rapier sword, right? So this sword was the product of centuries of working with metal, working with steel to try to create the perfect sword, which is pliable yet hard and long and sharp. And it was light, it was strong, it was deadly, and it gave the conquistadors the ability to just slice through entire groups of soldiers very quickly and very effectively because they had been trained very well with this sword. Next, domesticated horses, right? So the conquistadors, they moved very fast through the Americas and they were able to travel on top of a horse. And in the battlefield, having a horse gave them an enormous advantage, right? Because they were up nice and high. They were on top of this big beast, just 1,000 pounds of muscle that allowed them to go really, really fast and charge after people on the battlefield. It gave them an enormous advantage. They could travel faster, gave them a better position in battle. The domesticated horse is absolutely critical to their success throughout the Americas, but also here against the Inca Empire in South America. Okay, so those are the first three things that the video highlights. And then the video talks about the printing press, right? So this one is a little bit less obvious, but also extremely important, right? The printing press allowed conquistadors to share ideas on how to conquer indigenous peoples, right? So when Pizarro wanted to conquer the Incas, he could read the book that was written by Hernan Cortez, who had conquered the Aztecs in Central America. And that gave Pizarro a huge advantage because he was able to use the same strategy that Cortez had used. You could build on the successes and on the mistakes that had been made by other military men in the past. But why is it that the people of Europe had access to the printing press and they had access to written language, whereas people in the Americas did not? Well, it was not Europeans who invented the written language, right? One of the, or probably the first group of people to ever come up with a form of writing was the Sumerian people here in the Middle East. Well, I guess a little bit more like over here. So anyway, the Sumerian people came up with this form of writing, and then writing, the idea of writing spread throughout Europe, North Africa, throughout Asia, because they had networks of trade and travel between these distant groups of people, right? We learned about the Silk Road. Well, they had the Silk Road in Eurasia and North Africa, but they did not have the same thing in the Americas, right? So this exchange of ideas and goods, it existed in the old world, in Afro-Eurasia, because of latitude, right? So you see that the people of Europe, the people of North Africa, the people of the Middle East, the people of Asia, they all live along a similar latitude. And so the climate does not change too much as you travel from east to west or from west to east. And so they could have something like the Silk Road exist. and they could exchange ideas such as writing. Whereas in the Americas, they are very much built north-south, and so the climate changes so much as you travel north or as you travel south that there was no reason for them to set up a complex system of trade and travel in the New World, in the Americas. And so they didn't have anything like the Silk Road. And so even though systems of writing, early forms of writing, were created in Central America with the Aztecs and the Mayas, that did not travel to North America, or for today's story, it did not travel to South America because they didn't trade with each other in the same way that people did in Afro-Eurasia. Okay, so Europeans borrowed inventions like writing from other nations through the Silk Road. And such trade routes could not exist in the Americas because of their geography. Okay, and so an image of this would be the library in Salamanca University in Spain, which we saw in the video. It was this big library where conquistadors and other military men had written down their stories and shared their strategies, military strategies that they used in various battles throughout the centuries. So think back to the video that you watched. If the Incas had the printing press and they were able to exchange information with the Aztecs and the Mayas, what would they have done differently? Right? So this is a discussion we had in class. Right? And so students talked about the fact that the Incas would have known more about the conquistadors if they were able to get information from the Aztecs and the Mayas. They would have known that these men were going to use their swords and that they had guns, that they were going to attack using their horses. And the Incas could have come up with strategies in order to protect themselves, right, and defend their empire. And they probably would have been successful, right? And they would have made decisions based on the knowledge that they had. But because they did not have the printing press, then they were not able to do these things, and they ended up losing against Pizarro and his conquistadors, right? And then the last idea from the video is the spreading of germs. That was the last advantage that the conquistadors had. So over 90% of indigenous people in the Americas died because of diseases that were brought over from Afro-Eurasia. Okay, so Europeans got these diseases from their domestic animals. Remember that Europeans and people of Asia, people of North Africa, they had 13 out of the 14 animals that could be domesticated for use on a farm. And so they lived very close to their animals for a very, very long time, generations and generations. And these animals transmitted diseases to the Europeans over the years, diseases that the Europeans still had in their system. They were carrying these diseases with them when they arrived in the Americas, right? So flus that they had gotten from pigs and ducks, smallpox, and measles from cattle, right? And so all of these diseases had been transmitted to them. And then when they arrived in the Americas, they came across people who had never been exposed to these diseases before. And so indigenous people died from these diseases that they were not immune to. And then on top of that, the indigenous people of the Americas, they didn't have their own diseases to give to Europeans, right? At least to the not to the same degree. All right, and so the image from the video was a very graphic image of indigenous people dying from smallpox. Okay, and so these are key strategies, or rather, these are key advantages that the conquistadors had over the Incas and also many other, well, all indigenous groups that they came across as they conquered the Americas. Okay, so I hope that helps you understand the video a little bit more. This is not a substitute for watching the real Guns, Germs, and Steel video. Make sure you watch that one too. But these are the notes. Have a good day. Good day.